Hello and welcome to Minter Dialogue, episode number 299. Today is Sunday the 21st of October 2018. And this interview is with Dr. Kim Nilsson. Kim, with an MBA and a PhD in Astrophysics, is a pioneer in many aspects. She's founder and CEO of Pivigo, and in 2017 was awarded Entrepreneur of the Year in front of 1,000 business and technology leaders. Pivigo is a data science marketplace, connecting the data science community with companies and organizations looking to outsource their data science and AI needs. In this conversation with Kim, we look at how companies can better unleash the power of their data, the challenges with mining one's data, and the business of Pivigo. Welcome to the Minter Dialogue podcast, where we discuss branding and all things digital. I am Minter Dial, your host, and you'll find the show notes on my eponymous site, minterdial.com. Enjoy the show. Kim Nilsson, great to have you on the show. You and I met at the wonderful CogX, where both of us were speaking, and so I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about data. You also recently were nominated as one of the top 50 most influential women in IT in the UK. Congratulations. So tell us in your own words who you are, Kim.
Well, I am an ex-academic. For my confessions, I started out as a PhD astrophysicist, wanted to become an astronomer since I was 13 and had a straight career path to my PhD, and kept going for a bit longer as an academic until I finally had to accept that I wasn't enjoying it. And then, of course, had a huge challenge in trying to figure out how to convert my skills from being an academic into something that a company might want to hire. Long story short, ended up coming here to the UK to do an MBA, learn about business, figured that if I had a PhD and an MBA, surely someone would hire me, and would never have thought about starting my own business until that MBA that really helped me understand who I am, what I'm interested in. And also, of course, I met my co-founder, Jason, of my current business during the MBA, and together we became very passionate about working in this space between academia and industry and started our business, Pivigo.
Beautiful. So let's call it the pivot to Pivigo. What was the inspiration of the name Pivigo?
Well, actually, we were sitting in finance class at the MBA, and our finance teacher was talking about this acronym PVGO, which stands for Present Value of Growth Opportunities, which is related to share prices. And for some reason, she pronounced it Pivigo whenever she talked about it. And it just stuck with me. I thought it sounded funny. And then I thought, okay, we are working with PhDs that have a lot of growth opportunities, companies that have growth opportunities. It has a nice ring to it, a nice go at the end. Why not? Let's call our business Pivigo. And
certainly it must have been good on Google too, because it's original. So Kim, you so with your background in astronomy, something that, let's say, many of us sort of flirt with the idea, at least I do, astrophysics and the string theory and the dreams of the space. It has always fascinated me. So when you were in your background with your PhD in astronomy, you studied at Hubble. So for us, tell us what that was like, because we see, sometimes photographs sent out on emails or on Facebook. It looks extraordinary, but give us a little bit of an experience from behind the scenes. What happened?
Well, yes. I mean, we all imagine astronomers sitting in an observatory somewhere and looking through a lens at the stars. And of course, reality is not quite that romantic. I did have a good fortune to be allowed to go to telescopes, not Hubble, unfortunately, but I did get to go to some of the ground-based telescopes. And that's a great experience, but that's a few % of your time. Most of the time you sit behind a computer and you are working with computer files, images, or just tables of data. You're trying to make them look pretty, because when they come out of the instrument, unfortunately, they are not. And so it's a lot of what's called data reduction, just basically writing code, writing software, and trying to extract that one piece of information out of that data that can be of interest. Actually very similar to what data scientists are doing today.
It's not something that I was aware of before, but we always talk about the insurance industry as being one of the industries most apropos for data, and they've been using it from the beginning, as I understand it, with the actuarial approach. the science has so much data as well. Are there other industries that are at precursors with so much data, like science, space, and insurance?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, what's interesting also is to see that science has always been progressing industries. And I like to make the example of, for example, we talk about the cameras that astronomers use. The CCD camera was invented for astronomers, and that was the precursor to every digital camera we have today. And similarly, of course, the World Wide Web, as we know, was invented at CERN. So it was a tool for scientists to do their work that then ended up being mainstream. So I think there are a lot of history in these industries that we can talk about.
Beautiful. All right, so Pivigo, now that we know where the name came, what does Pivigo do?
So Pivigo is a data science marketplace and training provider. And basically what we try to do is to accelerate innovation with data in organizations. And we do that by connecting the organizations with our global freelance data science talent pool. We see that there is enormous potential in the data that companies have today, but most companies are just scratching the surface about what they're actually using that data for. And often it is a question of how do I get started? What kind of people do I need to do? What kind of projects can they do? And how do I manage them to get some value out of this? And this is what we try to help them do.
So we have these freelance data scientists who are applying for specific briefs that come from companies, as I imagine, on this marketplace, Pivigo. To what extent do the briefs become the key piece? Because I can only imagine that you still need to know a little bit the context of the company. I have no idea because I'm not in this. But I can only imagine that you still need to know something beyond the numbers, or do the numbers speak for themselves when you do the briefs?
Well, I think many will have seen the data science Venn diagram, the 3 skills you need being software or programming, maths and machine learning, and domain expertise. And there's certainly a great need to understand the business that this project sits within. So every company needs to involve business expertise in their projects. However, it doesn't necessarily need to come from the data scientists themselves. It can be just from that business manager who is excited about data, who is excited about working with a team of data scientists, and someone who can act as a bridge between the data science teams, the brains essentially, and the business.
And that person would be from Pivigo's team, or someone from the company that's helping to understand it or give them better understanding?
It's a mix. So sometimes we put that person into the team, we find someone that has exactly the right expertise and the experience and background to understand that particular problem. But even in those cases, I would say it is critical to have that one contact person within the company who wants to work with this, because there will always be little company-specific things that only people who have worked in the business for a period of time will know.
I'm just going to make a little break because I hear a little bit of a fuzzy sound, so I want to make sure it's not my microphone. I have a feeling it's my earphone.
Probably have a spare set of headphones.
It should be okay. I have my plenty of battery, so. Okay, so cool. So you obviously do help them. So that brings up the idea of how many people work at Pivigo, and what would be interesting also is to understand how many of your team are data scientists, coders. What constitutes a team that's supporting a marketplace?
Well, so we're a team of about 20 now, split across 2 locations, London and a very recently started Berlin office. And our team is very nicely mixed between, obviously, the sales team that go out and engage with our clients and the tech team. We currently have 3 data scientists in-house who spend a lot of time with the companies trying to understand what problems they have and how to turn that business problem into a data science problem. So it's a quite nice mix of people within the team now.
All right. How does one get started with this? Because at some level, let's say I'm working in a large organization, a la L'Oreal or something, and I know that big data's out there. I've read the Financial Times report, and I think it seems like that's something I should be doing. But how does one actually articulate the problem and then get that out and work through it? If you could maybe give us a business case that one of your preferred ones. I was saying, you told me before we started, you have about 150 projects, so you've got a lot of experience already on this. What do you think is the best or most interesting business case that illuminates how you extract data, value out of data?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's very important to start small. So not to embark on some massive 6-month transformational program, but actually start with a small project where you can get a tangible result quickly that can show to you the value of your data. And an example of a project we did that is one of my favorites, it's not a very sexy project, but it shows the potential, is we worked recently with a company called Parts Alliance. They are a mid-sized business based in north of England, and they sell car parts to garages. Simple business, a couple of hundred people on the phone selling car parts. And the interesting thing was that each seller was allowed to set their own price within certain limits. And of course, what they were curious were, are we selling at optimal prices? And so we had a team in, look at the data, sales points from the last 5 years was a significant amount of data. And we're able to not only, of course, spot which teams are well performing versus not so well performing, which can create some learning across teams, but actually we're able to come up with suggestions of what might be the right price based on time of day of the week, inventory levels, which is the client, what have they bought before, etc., etc. And we were able to show that with this model, this company alone would be able to increase their revenue by £6 million, which of course goes straight to the bottom line because it's not about selling more, it's about selling at a more optimal price. And so it goes to show that even within relatively small, simple, traditional businesses, a lot of value can be gained. And this was a 5-week project that we completed this in.
Remarkable. But I have to believe that still did mean a change in the way that they proceeded. For example, you had to explain to the salespeople why they were being programmed differently. And that means, well, we're doing this data project with this team called Pivigo. And then when they have to propose a price differently, they're no longer maybe as free. What did it take for the company then to execute in order to get the £6 million benefit?
Well, you're absolutely right, Minter. I think you've got a new business idea there because, of course, what comes after this wave of how do we do big data is the question of how do we implement it into our organization. And getting that cultural buy-in, getting that change in the organization is a huge challenge. In this case, getting their salespeople to accept the recommendation that a computer is telling you when they might feel, well, I have a relationship since 20 years with this client.
Well, I know that.
Exactly. That is a huge challenge. But it just takes the commitment of senior management. It takes the dedication of a team to train and to show that this is how we want to do things going forward. And then sooner or later, for example, these salespeople, they'll see at the bottom line that they're selling better and that they are performing better. And that ultimately will lead to the change.
Well, that sounds like it might benefit from having a pilot with some of the opinion leaders that are able to express it, experience it, then express it, and then bring in other people, especially as you scale up into a bigger team. You were mentioning training. You said that Pivigo also does training. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? And I want to see if that comes back into this notion of helping companies with their training.
Of course, yes. So actually, the way we started our business, as I mentioned, me and Jason were very passionate about the gap between academia and industry. And what we recognized was that there is incredible talent in our universities, motivated people with great technical skills who typically struggle to find a job, unfortunately. And then we have this industry that says, I can't find analytical talent. They don't exist. And so what we started now 5 years ago was our training program, Science to Data Science, which is a so-called boot camp or a finishing school, whatever you want to call it, where for 5 weeks, these incredibly smart people, smart and motivated people, work on projects with our partner companies. So they actually solve real data science problems for our partners in those 5 weeks, while of course gaining commercial experience, and they might even come out of it with a job at the end.
Well, from what I hear, the challenge is not only the scarcity of data scientists or experienced data scientists, but it's also the cost. Because the best data scientists, who, at least those who have experience, can basically name their price. Do you help them with salary adjustments? Is that something that's true in your experience?
Yes, God, yes. I've heard real horror stories of companies that have hired fresh out of a PhD at a reasonable rate, and 6-12 months down the line, Facebook or Google comes and offers them 3 times that salary. It's really tough for companies that are not Google or Facebook to retain people. It's relatively easy to hire at a junior level, but keeping them is hard. And so that's where I've seen some great examples from organizations who do a lot around the training element, around the looking at other benefits than just financial, looking at sharing IP. I've even heard that mentioned. Companies share IP with their employees to just keep them. What I do notice also, though, on the other side, is that academics who come out into the job market are often not very confident and will actually often sell themselves a bit short in the first job, which also contributes to that shift about 6 to 12 months into their career when they realize what they're actually worth. So it's our job then to prop up their confidence a little bit and say, you are great, don't ask for too much, but also know your value.
Interestingly, I've seen documentaries that talk about data scientists. In the past, it was a job for women. And then in the 80s, it merged or evolved and became a job for men. Today, we talk a lot about the lack of women in data science. Kim, obviously, you're part of that other movement, bringing back women in. To what extent is that a truth in the people coming out of university? And can we see, do you see evolutions where more women will be in the data science world?
Oh, absolutely. In our training program, pretty much every year we've increased the ratio of female to male participants. I'm very proud to say that the next one that we run in about 3 weeks' time currently has more women signed up than men. So we see a change, especially at those younger levels where they come in. And I think the challenge then will be to keep them once they're in there, because they end up in a very male-dominated world, but they have to feel welcome and they have to feel that there's a path forward for them. The challenge that I see at the younger levels is, again, the confidence piece. Academics in general are less confident than someone who's gone through a business degree, say. But even among academics, on average, again, the women have even less confidence. And they'll look, it's the typical thing, they'll look at the job spec and see that they have 3 out of 10, and they'll go, no way, I'm not even applying. Whereas a male applicant might go, well, I'll give it a go and see what happens. Yes. So again, I think those of us who are in industry, we need to do our best in building the confidence in the younger generation.
Yeah, totally. That's sort of why that very thought of that lack of confidence idea came up. When women oftentimes need to have done it 3 times to say, I know how to do it, whereas a man never done it once can say, I know. So when you are a company and you know you're sitting on a pool of data, what are the ways to actually unleash the power that's within it? And I'm thinking of the problems that come up, including the unstructured nature of it, the timeliness of it, and the ability for it to stay current. What are the things that really are the keys to unleashing that power that's within the data?
Number one, and so I have a presentation I give every now and then about the 10 steps from data dinosaur to data driven. And actually, after you've verified that you have data and that it's of suitable quality, the next thing you need to know is the question. Indeed, as you say, knowing the question is key. And the way when we work with our clients is we don't start with the data. We start with the business. What are the things that are keeping you as a CMO, as a CEO, as a CFO up at night that you worry about? Or where are the pinpoints where you think we could do better here, if only we knew how? So finding out what are the bottlenecks of the business, and then look at, okay, can the data solve that problem? And in many cases, it can, or at least you can do that little first proof of concept to prove that there might be something there. But it's always key to start with the business and start with the business question, and then see what can the data do to solve it.
So presumably in the case of the car parts business, they were saying, well, we really would like to improve our profitability, and then maybe we can maximize price. Let's take a look at that. That seems a lot easier. Other times, my brand's undervalued. These are sort of more abstract problems, and I suppose the challenge is coming down and whittling down to a question that then becomes data responsive.
Yes, so in another example, we started to speak with Ted Baker, the fashion business. They were concerned about marketing spend. So we were meeting with the CMO, and they were wondering, how can we make sure that the way we spend our marketing budget, which is quite significant, is spent well, and how we're getting the ROI on that marketing. And so with them, we then worked out a couple of different projects around segmenting their clients, understanding which channels they came from and which were the successful ones. And they ended up knowing exactly where to spend each marketing pound of their budget.
I'm guessing then, so maybe let's start with the 150 projects or so that you've already had under your belt. Do you have some generalization as to the type of projects you're working on? In other words, are we spending more time in manufacturing, in marketing, in pricing, or do you have any buckets within that seem to already start to emerge?
Well, yes. So interestingly, when we started the business, all our networking was quite random. It was whoever we managed to meet at an event, which meant that of those 150 projects and circa 85 clients, we have every type of business under the sun in some sense, large, small, different industries. But we do see certain types of projects coming up again and again, of course. Typically, customer segmentation, as I mentioned, is one. And so understanding your customer, similarly recommendation systems. So you bought item X, you might want item Y. Also, a lot of projects around optimization. So either price optimization, the case I mentioned before, or with Royal Mail, we've done quite a lot of logistics optimization, making sure that routes are optimized. So these are typical case studies that we see again and again and again, yes.
We're talking about data, and we haven't used the word AI just yet, the acronym, artificial intelligence. How do you use AI within your Pivigo marketplace? Is it something that is each time custom made, or are you already implementing within the platform?
Yes, so I am one of those individuals who will not easily jump on trends. And of course, as a business, we do have to use the hype words because that's what our clients expect to hear. However, there are projects where AI is required, and there are projects where a simple traditional machine learning algorithm will do just as well. And so it's just a question of finding the right solution for the right problem, and not always necessarily squeezing a particular type of solution onto a client. But the trend of AI is great in the sense that it's making people excited, and we need that excitement to build on to then actually get work done.
Touché. There's so many unengaged people. You write a blog on your site in Pivigo, and you cross-post on LinkedIn. And the one I picked up was you entitled it "The Evolution and Ethics of AI." And you wrote that an AI makes moral choices based on potential outcomes. So if you're not an AI proficient person like myself, what exactly should I be looking out for or thinking about when I'm trying to give these ethical instructions to an AI programmer?
Well, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? There is a very large debate going on in our community about ethics and about how to do it right. Obviously, we had the Cambridge Analytica scandal this spring, which really shone a bright light at maybe the darker sides of our industry. And of course, there's also been recently a lot of cries for a Hippocratic oath for data scientists. The idea that as with doctors, data scientists would have to sign up to do no harm. However, I also think that is not going far enough. Yes, we need to educate, and this is part of the education for data scientists. They need to understand the consequences of what they do. And so I think we need a multi-pronged approach to making sure that AI in the future is fair and ethical. It's about good education and understanding consequences. It's about regulation. So government needs to step in and put in regulation in place. And also companies need to take responsibility for what they do. And as part of that, finally also make sure that their teams are diverse. Because if you have a team that is all the same white males, there will creep in biases that they don't realize. But if you bring in people with different backgrounds, gender, skills, etc., then you're more likely to get a more balanced and fair algorithm.
My observation is that these types of projects happen a lot under the radar because they're being coded, and the vision I have is in a dark room overnight by these coders, and it's very easy to have these ethical issues sort of slide under the carpet. In that, if you ask, you need to have the gumption to push back to a client who's paying you. Say, you know what? It's interesting. You've only asked about white women. What about the others? And to push back can take a little bit of chutzpah in order to happen. So that can be a conflict because you're being paid by these people and you need to push back and bring your ethics into it. How do you see that happening? I mean, is there regulation can only do so much. It seems like a lot of this other stuff is under the hood.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer to it other than that the data science community is actually quite a close community today. Certainly here in London, I can't see why it would be different anywhere else. Many data scientists know each other. They go to events, they go to conferences, they hang out, they communicate online. And there is a strong sense of moral and obligation within that community. For example, when the Cambridge Analytica scandal broke in the spring, several of the people from our community were writing to me saying, well, Pivigo is usually shining a light on ethics. Please do something. Talk about this because we feel very strongly about this, and you are a voice in our society. So we did, and we get that feedback then that they really appreciate what we do. And so I think it's like in every industry, right? You will always have one or two bad apples, but most of them are really good. And I think the advantage we have as a community is that we are online, we are a strong community, and we can gang up and basically fight the evil forces in our society. Okay, I'm going all Star Wars here, but the rebellion for the good. No, but honestly, we are a strong community, and as a community, we can take responsibility for what we do as a community.
So I'd like to maybe just talk about this community because that's an interesting component. On the one hand, you have to have salespeople go out and find customers, and you have your programmers, your freelance data scientists that are out there. How do you manufacture a community which presumably is quite distant? Everyone's distributed and coding up in Liverpool and maybe Helsinki and elsewhere. And how do you craft your community? And are there gates to entry? How do you select the people that you want to have in your community?
Well, you craft that community with a lot of love, with a lot of time and care and love. And what we at Pivigo have been doing is for 5 years we have been going out to universities, speaking at these sort of events, the conferences, engaging with them wherever they are. And that means also a lot online, of course, because many of them are based throughout the world. And then with time, the word spreads that this is a nice group to be part of. And for example, for our training program, about half of the people who come to us now come recommended from a previous fellow. So it's that network effect of spreading the word. And that's where, for us also, it is important that we are a paragon of good, that we have that reputation of being a place where it's safe for data scientists to be, where they can learn, they can get help, support, etc., and ultimately where they can get jobs. And so that's just how we spread the word.
Does social media play a part of this, or are we talking more in Reddit and other sort of forums that are appropriate for, because I don't even know them, that are appropriate for data scientists?
Well, interestingly enough, when we started out, we realized there were not that many good forums for them to meet. And so, in fact, what we're trying to build with Pivigo.com, with our platform, is a place for them to meet and engage with each other. Of course, there's plenty of places where they are currently finding data sets to play with or learning about the latest news, but not really a great place to meet. And so that's what we're trying to build. Social media, of course, we use it. It's a nice way to get in front of their eyes for the first time, but it's not necessarily where they communicate with each other. It's actually most of the communication, I think, happens a lot also in local events, wherever they are.
My mind is worrying and thinking about, let's say, freelance drivers that work for Uber that can also work for Lyft. Is that something that you're challenged with as well? Because presumably these freelancers, they need to be fed projects. And so on the one hand, you have to go out there and find the business, get the briefs, and then push it out to your marketplace. How do you structure that? Because it's tricky. You don't want them to be available on all other competitive platforms. You want them on yours, and you've got to have enough business to keep them occupied. So how do you manage that?
Well, unlike Deliveroo or Uber or etc., most of the people who work for us, they don't have to do this. They could get a full-time job tomorrow with one of those super high salaries if they wanted to. So they do it because they want to, first of all. And secondly, that means that we have a mix of people that we work with, from professional freelancers who work only on projects like this, to also a lot of people who are sort of dipping in and out of a career. So maybe taking a full-time job, then a project, etc. And for the professional ones, it's just a question of making sure we have interesting work for them. What they want is different projects, new challenges, exciting clients, and we just have to make sure we have the best projects for them. But I'm not. Of course, they're allowed to go and work somewhere else if they want. I want them to come and want to work with us.
I feel the idea of the what do you call it? The Star Wars idea, being the paragon of good. So last question before we finish off, Kim, and this is more about the younger people who are looking, because obviously we need to have more data scientists, even though we may have, going through your program, if you're a kid who's thinking data is what I want to do, or a parent who's trying to advise their kid, hey, data is a great play, what would you recommend them to do in order to start getting into it and understanding it and crafting it, learning about it? What kind of advice would you provide?
Well, there's a lot of resources online. First of all...
Which is part of the problem, because it's like you punch in data science, now you got gazillions of choices.
Which, again, sorry for the plug, but this is what we're trying to build with Pivigo.com. So 2 parts to that answer. First of all, in terms of education, any science degree will do. So anything that interests you or your child in terms of science, go and do it, because you can use any of those paths to get into data later. In terms of concretely, what can anyone do right now? There are a lot of learning resources online, and indeed we identified that the plethora of what's available is one of the challenges. So we are launching in the next week or so a feature on Pivigo.com called our AI Mentor. So the word AI did come in there again, didn't it? It sneaked in. Well, this is a personalized learning experience. And so it's essentially a guide that asks you what are your preferences, and then will take you through all these resources, both in terms of reading, tutorials, challenges that you can do, and guide you through that learning process. Because this is what we find now. The conversation has gone from why should I become a data scientist to how do I become a data scientist, and how do I get started? And there is just so much out there, and we're hopefully going to try to help guide people through it with our AI mentor.
Well, that is perfectly timely and good last question. Thank you for that, Kim, and I'll put that in the show notes, of course. Tell us, how can anyone get in touch with you, follow what you're up to, and or know more about Pivigo?
Well, website Pivigo.com has all of these features that I've mentioned. Sign up, it's for free. There are no entry requirements other than an interest in data science. So sign up and use our features there. And of course, all our contact details are there. And I'm on Twitter, Kim K. Nilsson, for anyone who wants to get in touch as well.
Kim, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having listened to this recording of the Minter Dialogue Show. You'll find the show notes and other blog posts on minterdial.com. If you enjoyed the show, please like the handy Facebook button, or better yet, head over to iTunes to give a rating and review. But first, relax to Joss Sachs's Finger Paint.
Oh, fill me with all your colors, any different way to rid me of the gray, and heal me with all your imperfections that you mention in your lack of self-security. Oh, I wouldn't care about the art form as long as you would feel warm, wrapped in canvas. Hold me tightly, slowly we would paint a lover's portrait with all your favorite shades, and we'd paint it with our fingers to show the world the way we feel. Oh, the way we feel. Oh, so messy. The ridges in our palms make colors blend and look ugly in the end, but they're pretty in their own disgusting values. We'd hang our portraits in the hallways, make our house guests cringe. Oh, I wouldn't care about the art form as long as you would feel warm, seeing all your colors on the canvas as we paint a lover's portrait with all your favorite shades, and we paint it with our fingers to show the world the way we feel. Oh, I know, and all these limitations, oversaturation. Let me paint, oh, let me paint, oh, let me paint, oh, let me paint, and I paint a lover's portrait with all